Kia ora and welcome to Cinema in Context, as we discuss all things film and the connections between. My name's Jeremy Downing.
I'm Max Tarrant.
And I'm Sarah Watt.
And each month at Cinema in Context we discuss two films, one current and one retrospective, with some kind of connection. It could be the same director or lead actor or similar theme. And this month we are discussing Trainspotting, which came out in 1996, and T2 Trainspotting, which came out in the last week. And the connection being they're both directed by Danny Boyle, they both star the same actors, and hey, it's a sequel. T2 is a sequel of Trainspotting 1. So yeah, do you want to give us a bit of a rundown, Sarah, on Trainspotting?
Trainspotting came out in 1996. It was Danny Boyle's second film after Shallow Grave, and it starred Ewan McGregor, who had been in Shallow Grave, but if you'd missed that film, this was pretty much a breakout role for him. Johnny Lee Miller, who was at the time just married to a young ingenue called Angelina Jolie, and a couple of other up-and-coming actors. And the film's basically, it's based on the novel by Irvine Welsh, which is written very, very much in a Scottish vernacular, like literally on the page, that makes it incredibly difficult to read and to understand. And it's kind of an episodic film, as the book is episodic, around the lives of 5 junkies, heroin addicts living in Edinburgh at around the same time period, so the early to mid-90s.
Excellent. And Max, you want to give us a rundown on the latest addition to this? I guess we can call it a franchise, can't we?
Feels I guess two makes a franchise.
The addiction franchise. T2 Trainspotting.
So T2 comes out 2016, 20 years later. Sorry, 2017, but practically 20 years later. This is Danny Boyle come through after winning Best Picture and Best Director for Slumdog Millionaire. He's got a few more films under his belt, many of which have been big successes. Sunshine, we've got
28 Days
Later, we've got 127 Hours. So some major films. And his chops are very strong in this film, but it's got a lot of the same themes, obviously. We're interested in how he's dealt with this connection when it's 20 years later, but it's going to be interesting to see what we think about it.
Yeah, and interestingly, and I didn't realise this until I started watching some of the interviews around the film, but they had a falling out, Danny Boyle and Ewan McGregor, and I think it's one of the key reasons why they haven't revisited this material.
So it was because it was around the beach.
The beach,
Danny Boyle directed the film adaptation of this hugely successful Alex Garland novel, The Beach, which, as we know, starred Leonardo DiCaprio. Ewan had assumed, because he'd done 3 films by then, Shallow Grave, Trainspotting and Life Less Ordinary, with Boyle. They got on really well and was very, very miffed that he wasn't cast in it. And yeah, they had quite a, I was going to say quite a public falling out. Actually, I think it was quite a private falling out, and they basically had nothing to do with one another for well over a decade, going on to 2 decades. And so you're absolutely right, Jeremy. And there was talk about 10 years ago, apparently, of doing a Trainspotting sequel. But and I understand that the sort of film production companies were like, oh, you know, we'll just cast with whoever we can get at the time. And Danny Boyle was like, no, if we don't get the actual cast from the original film, then we're not doing this at all. And so it was sort of backburnered for another many, many years. So it's been a long time coming.
Seems like a strange idea from the get-go a little bit to do a
Trainspotting
sequel to Trainspotting. It's kind of the film that is almost antithetical to doing a sequel. It's got its own lifeblood. It's so powerful as it is. But the way it's come out is very interesting, as we'll get into. So, The Beach.
Yes.
Sorry to get off track this early in the piece, but is that really horrible? I went on some of the movie review shows.
I quite like it.
I remember loving that as a kind of 16-year-old boy or something.
As a novel or the film?
The film.
Yeah, no, look, I mean, it's a page
it gets
turner.
slated on the internet.
Yeah. I like it. I think it's a good film.
I thought it was quite fun.
Yeah, possibly the ending gets a little bit out of whack, but I personally really enjoyed that movie. But Porno, which is the sequel novel, but they made a film with that, didn't they? Did they?
That I'm not sure of, but certainly not with this cast. They didn't. So Trainspotting 2 is drawn from Irvine Welsh's sequel to Trainspotting, in inverted commas, which, as you say, is called Porno, and and written by John Hodge, who's the sort of long-time collaborator with Danny Boyle on most of his screenplays and whatnot. So I gather that it's probably a bit of a... It's partly adaptation, but strongly sort of created by him and Boyle and Hodge and Welsh to create this sort of new life form 20 years on.
That helps to know that it does draw on porno a bit, because I thought like they were just going into this and they go on basically set themselves the stage and going, okay,
what are we going to do?
We've got these characters back together, and what are we going to see? And I was like, this is actually pretty impressive, the story they've come up with around that, but that makes more sense.
Well, it's interesting, I hadn't really thought of this, but the film is about reconciliation, and, you know, when you've got that backstory about Ewan McGregor and Danny Boyle, this is, you know, effectively their reconciliation project.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I wonder how much of it is a meta connection.
We should definitely remind viewers, particularly those who haven't revisited old Trainspotting yet, and I would just say at this point, even though T2 purports to be a standalone story, and it does a little bit of it does a reasonable job of sort of expositioning kind of backstory, I don't think it's a standalone film at all. So I think you definitely need to refresh your memory of the '96 film. And now I've completely forgotten what my point was.
The reconciliation?
Oh, right. Absolutely. So we need to remind viewers that at the end of the '96 film, Renton hoofs it out of a hotel room with the £16,000 that they've scammed in this supposedly amazing drug deal. And of course, 16,000 quid to us nowadays just sounds like not worth getting out of bed for. And we see him walk off with a smug look down the streets of Edinburgh, and that's the end of that. So in a way, it was built for a sequel, because we'd like to go, oh, well, you know, what's happened in the intervening 20 years? And so in the second film, Mark Renton, returns from living in Holland, actually, in Amsterdam, to Edinburgh. And yes, as you say, Jeremy, has to then reconcile with his old friends, whom he ripped off and hasn't seen for 20 years, reconcile what he has or hasn't achieved in the 20 years of his life. And so it's very much about, coming to terms with myriad things in life. And I think the beauty of it is it taps into the audience who are approximately the same age when it happened, who may now be looking back at the last 20 years and going, what have I done with my life? Hopefully I'm not a junkie, but can I really be said to have made the most of, the 2 decades I've had?
And just to touch on that point, I would definitely rewatch the first film. I messaged a friend of mine last night and said, highly recommend T2 Trainspotting, and even more so rewatching the first one, because I described it as being deeply intertwined.
Yes,
it's
hugely. We should actually remind the audience as well that we don't have with us
William.
Oh, sorry, William.
Oh, William.
We were so we went all Danny Boyle on him, didn't we?
We
were all
did.
like, we've got this. We're just going to carry on. We don't need that guy.
Sorry,
William.
So next podcast is going to be our reconciliation with William.
He couldn't be with us today.
He's busy. He's actually. We're all teachers, and he's busy working hard with his Niuean group who are getting ready for Polyfest, the big Polynesian inter-schools cultural competition, which is happening in a few weeks. So, he's got a good cause to not be here. Yeah.
But the best thing about this film, I think, was the way a sequel for me, unless it's a classic sequel, which is just building on the storyline, if it's something like this, it's 20 years later or something, obviously it's almost impossible not to have a direct relationship with the original, as this one does, and partly because the original is so powerful in itself. This one, which is it was a cult film, major cult film, captured a whole lot of the subculture that hadn't been spoken about at the time, and it treated drugs in a way that hadn't been treated before this. It actually treated drugs as, at the start, it kind of treats them as almost positive. It delves into this aspect, this is so fucking amazing. And then later on it kind of goes, but it's just
it will ruin your
well.
life. Well, you're right. I think it's really important, isn't it? You're so right that it actually sort of helped to sell the idea of why these idiots, in inverted commas, would take drugs in the first place. Because probably those of us who haven't been heroin addicts will go, well, this is just ridiculous. So just say no. But then when you realise... That's right. But when you realise why you might want to actually choose heroin... Absolutely, you get under the skin of these characters who aren't any longer just caricatures of junkies, but are real people with real addictive
So it does
problems.
some really important kind of excavating of a subaltern kind of culture that hadn't been spoken and hadn't been read and hadn't been presented to the population at large, but which many people had tinglings of, at least in their own lives.
But I think that the satire,
Yes, I was going to say that.
heroin as a metaphor for capitalist, consumerist living and where we find meaning. And I mean, that speech, the opening speech
in the first film,
is so fantastic. Which, from what I read about the film, it was originally in the middle of the movie, and then they needed an opening, so they just moved it to the start. And interestingly, I'm not really spoiling too much, I thought the follow-up of that speech in the second film was fantastic.
Same.
And the way they dealt with it, I just really took me by surprise.
Yes.
And the way that Ewan McGregor particularly was directed to deliver it was just on par. I thought, well done, team. You have followed up that iconic speech. And I also loved how the film didn't try and open with a bang in that way.
Yeah.
It just got into the story, and I was a little bit standoffish. I was like, I'm not sure about this. And by that speech, I was so sold on
How
this
does it
movie.
start again?
The new movie.
second film?
Yeah.
It starts off with Ewan McGregor's character on a treadmill.
That's right. And
Intercut
that was
with-
nice.
intercut with-
It's very much real life, right? This time,
Yes.
starting with real life and moving on back
And
to what's that subaltern world doing now?
Yeah, so he's a white middle class commercial kind of guy on a treadmill in a gym, thinking about his health and his ordinary life in Amsterdam, and then everything changes when he goes home.
And he, I don't, this isn't a huge spoiler, but he falls straight off the treadmill, which I think is great. It's like you've got this thing that you think is really going. It's obviously metaphorical. This thing that's just going, sweet, we're here, we're working, and then just this pothole, just out of nowhere,
Well,
nothing.
then you die.
It's just fuck.
I mean, he doesn't die,
Yeah.
but then figure out it's the metaphor, isn't it?
Where did that come from, and why is everything so bloody challenging? Why can't it just go?
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, I had a couple of things going on in my world on Tuesday and Monday, and I thought, oh god, I've got to watch this Trainspotting, and I remember loving it, but I was like, I knew some of the content in the film, really heavy content, and I was like, I can't watch a baby die today,
You mean from the first
From the
film?
first movie, so I rewatched it on, I think, Tuesday night. I thought, an hour and a half, I could do that. And absolutely just loved it. I just thought, my gosh, this is such a good movie. And then I was quite excited about watching the second movie, but didn't have the hugest expectations. I was kind of like, oh gosh, what are they going to do? Like, I don't really know why they're making this film. And I have to say, I thought it was fantastic. And from my point of view, this is one of the strongest two films that we've compared, because I just thought both movies are I would quite confidently suggest to people.
Yeah, I like your talk about having things going on in your life. Like, it's a bit of a struggle, and you're just like, I felt the same. I was like, I don't really feel like going out to see this movie, but even going out to T2, it was such a reflective place to be, to go into that film.
Yes.
It does a fantastic job of reflecting on the culture that's around us, and it was really enjoyable just to be kind of meditative about what's going on around us and our own lives.
I think you're absolutely right, and I've spoken about the greater maturity of the second film, and it's partly obviously because it literally is more mature because it's 20 years older, and so are the characters. But as we've said, there's so much reflection in the film, and reconciliation, and then ultimately sort of redemption in the film.
And peace.
Yeah.
It's like a search for peace, isn't it?
Yeah, and so us as viewers, everybody is viewers. I mean, I just don't know anybody who's going to see the sequel without having seen the first, and I don't really know any young people who would go see the sequel because it won't feel for them like the 96 one did for us in 96, if you know what I mean. For some of us, anyway, the slightly more mature ones around the table. And so you're right, the audience is watching T2, feeling what is going on screen. Obviously slightly different because most of us probably aren't recovering heroin addicts, but, as I mentioned before, taking stock of the last 20 years, thinking about friendship. And I just think, I just have so much respect for Danny Boyle as a bloke. He was at the premiere in New Zealand, as a lot of people will know. We don't often get the film director coming here. Tarantino came last year, Boyle came this year. Gosh, he comes off as a thoroughly nice chap. And, so humble and really honest and really lovely about everything, and particularly about this film. And he explained that the way that that when they were creating T2, they put it in front of a test audience. And they also did some market research beforehand, and they were like, what is it you would really want from a Trainspotting sequel? And he said that the three things that people came back with were, we want the same cast, so definitely it's got to be the same people who are in it. We want a pumping soundtrack, so it's got to have as seminal a soundtrack as the...
Major tick.
Yeah, that's right. And he said he was really disappointed that no one said, and it's got to be the same director. So he kind of made a joke at his own expense that, no one really cared about that. I'm trying to remember what the third thing was that people really wanted. But it was a very straightforward thing. Oh, no, they wanted the original boy cast and Kelly McDonald and a pumping soundtrack. And so he thought, okay, well, if we can deliver those sorts of things. But he didn't deliver a sloppy sequel, did he? He's delivered something thoughtful, thought-provoking.
Oh, it's very impressive, and like you said, Jeremy, I think it's very impressive as an example of what Danny Boyle can do. To go back to something like that with so much essence in it, and to recreate something of that or a reflection on that is really impressive to do it well. So many films have done that crappily. And what I was going to say earlier was that I think one of the ways he does that, you have to reflect on the original, but he doesn't just kind of go, we're picking up bits from the original and doing them again or anything.
Or homaging in a way that's so cheesy.
No,
it is a reflection on nostalgia. It's a reflection on how do we go back to the past and what does the past mean.
Yes.
And the best sequels have to do that. They have to, in some ways, burrow into the original and make the original different.
Yeah.
So they don't stand on their own. They recognise that there's already a relationship with the original, and somehow they have to change each other, kind of.
You make such an interesting point. Nostalgia, I think, is the key word of this whole now new franchise. But you make such an interesting point about watching T2, suddenly my understanding of the first film is different. Now, if I remember rightly, in Trainspotting 1, there is nothing about those young men's backstory at all. We're thrown into their life. We sort of think, why on earth are these jokers friends? But they are, and we go along with it. The second film is so steeped in backstory and flashbacks to them as children, and suddenly we realise, oh golly, they grew up together. This friendship between Renton and Begbie goes back to first day of primary school, and then you're right, therefore that casts the first film in a very different light, doesn't it?
But it also makes a statement about that first film, which is they're taking those relationships so for granted, and then it just completely changes the dynamic of them in the second movie. I'm going back to the commentary about Danny Boyle and his style. One of the things that strikes me about this movie, and every film of his that I see, is that there's just such a sense of joy in life, which I guess probably comes out of his personality.
Yeah.
But it's like the film about heroin addicts. Like I said, I was like, oh gosh, can I go back in there? But it's just, it really is a celebration of these people, regardless of their addictions.
It's like it's not a Steve McQueen film about, the champions in hunger and shame.
Flipping 12 Years a Slave. Shame I'll never go back and watch, even though I actually quite enjoyed it.
So you could imagine Steve McQueen doing a heroin addict movie, and it would be quite a different ballgame.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
So, but you're right, Danny Boyle's sort of exuberance.
And also I think it made me realise as I was watching the film last night, and there's, there is drug use in the film, and it's like, I find it really hard to watch a lot of drug-based TV series and films. If it glorifies it too much, I'm just like, no, that's been done. And so it needs to have weight. It needs to have consequences, because that's the reality of most of the people I know. I've got a lot of friends who take drugs, but I've got a handful of them whose lives have been destroyed by various drug experiences. And so I feel like there's a responsibility there. But then on the other hand, if it's too dark and depressing, it's like, why am I watching this? So to do it well is for me, The Wire is fantastic. It deals with it well. The Trainspotting films. Requiem for a Dream is really hard to watch. But I still think it's a brilliant movie.
I can't return to it yet. I think I watched it 12 years ago or something.
It's
I've not gone back yet.
But that's why I don't like Breaking Bad. I can't watch Breaking Bad for that reason, So I just take my hat off to Danny Boyle. He is masterful, and it feels so effortless, but you know that it's so well constructed.
I think most of this podcast has to be dedicated to congratulating him, doesn't it? Because he's just done a fantastic job. But I think it's interesting how a lot of it's box ticking, which is interesting, but he manages to still pull it off. Like the way you've said, like that would surprise me that he just went and did market research, like very much kind of populist
or something.
Populist kind of way of doing it. Not not the auteur kind of going, okay, I want to change something, which is in some ways what I'd philosophically prefer. But the fact that he does that, he goes, what do you want? I can do that. I can bring this all together. I've got these things. So he does that. He redoes some of the famous shots from the original without making it sloppy, and uses those probably mainly for the trailer. And so I watched the trailer and I was like, I don't know if I want to see this that much. It's just kind of
looks
it's going to be a bit
rehash.
cheap. It's just going to be like, oh, we're doing the same thing again. It manages to capture the kind of key qualities of the original. It's cheeky. It's surreal, it's exhilarating, it's stomach-churning in all very different aspects. You know, it's got the stomach-churning aspects of puke.
The scatological stuff, eh?
Yeah.
It's part of the movie, isn't it?
And kind of the bros doing crazy things like running around naked in paddocks and swindling people out of their cash in a karaoke kind of situation.
Delightful scenes.
Yeah.
Can I just say that there are a lot of callbacks to the original film, but that luckily they feel more delightful for the viewer, don't they? Because you're like, that's just like that scene when blah blah blah.
Yeah.
Rather than it being, as you say, like a cheap kind of
a
shortcut. Again,
I hate that sort of stuff when it feels like, you know, it's that kind of like wink wink nudge nudge. And I'm just like, oh come on.
There was a couple of moments maybe that I didn't think they needed to do. You know, everybody will know the smile that Ewan McGregor gives as the car
there's a bit
punches into him.
Yes.
I thought that was a little bit, didn't
on the
really
nose.
need that on the second one.
I agree with you.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. Talking about Kelly McDonald, I don't want to say too much about this because it is a nice surprise, but I was, but I knew she was in the film, but I was sitting there going, when's she going to come into it?
Yes.
Because for me, she is just, Ewan McGregor is an absolute star in the first film, but she is just so fascinating to watch. Every scene with her in it. I love her anyway. So, and in the moment, you hear her voice before you actually see her, and I was like, oh yes.
Yes.
You know? And you kind of figure out what her role in the film is at that point as well. I just thought it was such a nice
something
surprise.
quite quintessential kind of British female about her, I felt.
You know she's Scottish?
Yep.
Oh, right.
British, yeah.
Yeah, okay. But the nice thing is her character is so consistent, isn't it? As Diane, the young Diane, was extraordinarily plucky in that first film. I mean, she was literally a schoolgirl going to nightclubs in nothing but a tiny slinky silver dress and, you know, being incredibly confident. And you're so right, Jeremy. It's lovely to see her again.
And she, again, I don't want to spoil it, but I think she gets one of the best lines in the whole film.
Yes.
And it makes a statement on both her character and Ewan McGregor's character. And I love that they could have done more things with her character and kind of ruined it. But you know, she. You know, I think it's safe to say she's not a major fixture of the film, but when she is in it, it feels very worthy.
There. Yeah, that's right.
Overall, would you? I assume that you guys think that the original is still far superior to the.
Not necessarily.
No, really?
Yeah.
Wow. So I watched the second one first, and when I started watching the first one, I was really happy that I'd done it that way.
Oh, really?
Because I was like, oh wow, this is so much a bigger experience for me. It felt like, actually not a bigger experience, but a more tight.
So hang on, had you seen Trainspotting 1?
Yes, I had previously, but not for a while.
All right, okay.
And so I kind of thought, that is a good film. Watched T2, this is great.
Yeah.
And then I watched Trainspotting again, and I was just like, wow, this is tight. This is a tight ship. This is the iconography is just huge. Him jumping out of the toilet, and him the surreal moments really, and where he falls through the carpet. It's just so much bigger than the film.
You're right, and it is bravura, particularly for someone's second major film as well. Back in the day, eh?
Yeah, and it's just the cinematography is less flashy, but so simple, quite stark. The colour scheme is fantastic. Like it's drab, but it's drab, but somehow it has flashes of kind of brilliance in it.
See, I hear you. I couldn't remember the first one very well, so I really enjoyed going back and revisiting it. But I loved the second one. I thought there was for me equally there was a shot in the start of the film when he goes and visits his dad.
Yes.
And there's the shadow of the mother. Did you see
that?
Yes, and it's Ewan McGregor's shadow.
Yes.
I just was that is phenomenal.
Yes.
And then there's quite a few shots, and again, I don't want to spoil too many of these, but all of the suggestions of trains going past.
Yeah.
And I just blew me away some of the filming.
Yes, I was going to say, in terms of that's what I thought when I watched this. The chops of the man is just like, he is really doing some like cinema as cinema lovers love it. You know,
in the
like,
second film.
In the second film, very very postmodern, even more postmodern with major media saturation. We're jumping through all kinds of shots, but for me that just felt a little bit more unwieldy. And that as well as he did bringing all the elements together. It still wasn't quite as tight as the original.
I think his aesthetic, I think you're right, I think you touch on a really important point. If I remember rightly, and we've in my household recently rewatched a lot of Boyle's films, so we redid Shallow Grave and Slumdog Millionaire and whatnot, and there is so on his in his CV, if you will, if I remember rightly, Shallow Grave and the original Trainspotting are shot really nicely, but relatively conservatively compared with what he's gone on to do. Slumdog Millionaire is full of Dutch angles. It's Dutch tilt all the time. And same with everything since. We watched Trance the other night, which is constantly, I mean, he might as well have just put the bloody tripod on an angle and just shot it like that.
It's a strange film.
It is a strange film, and it's trying to be all fancy.
Yeah.
And then T2 as well. Boom, boom, it's everywhere. The lights are everywhere. The aesthetic of it is very, very full on. And so I see that as definitely consistent with the change that he has made as a filmmaker, because he's really unsubtle, particularly things like Slumdog Millionaire. You know, it is all, as I keep saying, slow-mos and Dutch angles and bright lights and all that sort of thing. Back in the day, back in Trainspotting day, it was the story, really, wasn't it? I mean, you're right, it was the falling down between the carpet, it was the baby on the ceiling, it was the going into the toilet, and all those things blew our minds in '96 because you didn't really see that kind of thing.
And it came out at a time when 90s realism was at its height, so, you know, it was very real, but then it was very absurd as well, surreal.
That's right. Yeah. Whereas now it's sort of like his camera work has almost taken over from this, has become, it isn't surreal, but it's become the bigger thing.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
I mean, to talk back to your point, Max, I mean, I don't think it's, personally, I thought they were on par with each other, and I think sequel expectations I typically find are so astronomically high that I will take a fantastic sequel, and you know, and kind of, and also Trainspotting 1 hit such a nerve, and became such a cultural phenomenon. So you can't repeat that.
No,
you know? How can you repeat?
I would have been really wary if I was him making T2. Yeah, definitely, because he could have messed that up.
I mean, I think that it reminded me a lot of the Before Sunrise series, you know, and it was this, you know, 9 years later with each of those films. There's that sense of nostalgia, but they have moved on.
Yes,
and. So, I don't know, it'd be interesting to see if in 10 or 20 years they bring out a third one, how we will feel about the whole series.
That's a really interesting analogy, given that the Before films, or the Sunrise, Sunset films are so different sort of thematically. I loved the second one. So we had Before Sunrise and then Before Sunset. Before Sunset for me was the superior film.
Yeah,
and then
I agree.
Before Midnight,
Yeah, I quite like that one.
Yeah, it was fine, but by then I was like, I don't really want to see you guys going through all this anymore. So personally, I'm not looking forward to a T3, because I don't think I'm that interested in what happens to them. I love seeing them now. They're pretty much my age.
But if in 20 years they'll be almost 70.
Yes, but I don't. I mean, but what will they have done? I mean, do I really want to see that Big B's continued the way he was? Do I really want to see that Spuds has continued the way he was?
You know the whole story of Big B and how Robert Carlyle played him?
No.
As a closeted homosexual man?
No.
And so that was very heavily hinted at in the second one when he couldn't get it up with his wife.
I didn't know
and
that.
And his rage comes from
his impotence.
His suppressed homosexuality.
And his impotence, quite literally.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so it's interesting that he, when he does get it up, I was thinking, I mean, they suggested it's for violence. But,
yes, that's right. That is fascinating.
Yeah.
I love.
Or is it for Ewan?
Well.
I don't know.
Well, then it gets into sort of maybe not homoerotic inferences, but certainly bromance. The whole business, doesn't it? Yeah, that's right. And all these men with really dysfunctional heterosexual relationships or non-existent heterosexual relationships, and this very, very strong sort of brotherly commitment to one another. Renton is deeply loyal to Spud, isn't he?
Yeah. I mean, there's also the comment from the girlfriend about them sleeping with each other.
Yes, that's right. Why don't I just leave you to it?
Yeah.
That's right. I love how in this film it was so subtle and it was never referred to. I loved how they all just instinctively called one another Mark, Simon.
It had changed,
Daniel. Yeah, that's right, Franco.
And
And yeah, they're all suddenly calling each other by their given names. I thought that was really quite charming. I thought it signalled this maturity, or ostensible maturity, that had gone on. You know, Spud's had a kid now, and Simon is sort of, Simon's sick boy is
I didn't even know who
sort
Simon
of a
was.
businessman.
When it said Simon, I was like, who's Simon?
Well, this is it. Apart from Mark Renton, I don't think we ever heard anybody called by their real name in the first film.
Yeah.
And it was only because Diane called him Mark, because she wasn't going to call him Renton or Rentboy. But suddenly they're calling Begbie Franco and Francis the whole time, you know. And I don't know, I really liked that. I felt really... The funny thing is, my overriding feeling in the second film was I felt so warmly towards them, and I felt so happy and comfortable in myself to be back with them, which is really weird, because I don't think I had that strong an attachment to the first film. I thought it was terrific, I thought it blew my mind, blah, 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 but, I hardly wanted to hang out with them. And for some reason, it felt so nice to be back with them.
Yeah.
My husband, my male husband, is what I'm saying. He found it very, very emotional and quite, I think he even shed a few tears through it. And I was not teary at all through the second film. But I think it kind of affected all of us in some quite deep, meaningful way.
I think it's that realization that actually, I had some really strong friendships at that time of my life that I took for granted. I can relate to that. And, I'm not quite 47, I'm only 30, but, you think about my 19, 20, 21, 22 years, university years, and I have lost touch already with some people that I think, oh man, or even high school friends that I've reconnected with through Facebook and have yet to actually meet up again in person, you do get to that as you get older. You start to realise what's important in life.
That's right.
And the whether it's an addiction to heroin or obsessions that you have or your goals in life or your ambitions, actually what matters is people. And that's very heavily in the DNA of the second film.
True.
What's Spud's real name?
Daniel Murphy.
Daniel. Oh no, in the film. Is that it?
Daniel Murphy.
Oh, yeah, Daniel. Okay.
Daniel Murphy, but he's Ewan Bremner. Interesting trivia fact, ladies and gentlemen. When the original Trainspotting happened, Ewan Bremner, who plays Spud, was playing Renton on the stage because the theatrical production of Trainspotting was already happening in the West End. I think it was in the West End. Well, I think it was West End, not Broadway. And he was Renton, and he wanted to be Renton, but Boyle cast Ewan McGregor instead and then made him Spud. Now, flipping heck, you look at Ewan Bremner's face 20 years on, he could only be Spud with that. I mean, he looks aged, doesn't he? I mean, we all look aged, but, he looks aged with his bulging eyes and his kind of his gurning and his sort of over-the-top sort of acting. I just can't, I would never have been able to see him as the vaguely attractive, virile Mark Renton,
Yeah, just speaking about how enjoyable it is to be in the presence of these characters, they do a great job with Spud and is delving into his kind of story a bit more, and he does this writing in the film, which is just beautiful.
It's beautiful.
Which, by the way, is word for word the novel.
Oh, right,
fantastic.
Lovely.
I also don't know if you picked this up, but the title Trainspotting, I mean, it's never explained in the first film. But there's a hint to it in the second movie, and I don't want to say how or why, but did you pick that up?
Well, I think in the intervening 20 years, so we can spoil it, I think, because it is a term.
Yeah.
Train spotters are people in, usually Britain, who do hang out on train platforms in their Macintoshes with their hats and their notebook and their binoculars, and they train spot and they note down the numbers of all the trains. And it's kind of an addictive, I suppose. It's a relatively harmless but quite nerdy hobby. But you're right, in the first film, there is a scene of them standing on a platform, but other than that, there isn't really.
It's not really a huge spoiler.
No.
There's a scene where one of the characters is reading back one of the stories, and it's a memory of them all drunk on a dilapidated train platform that's going to be broken down. And it's Bugbee that says, you blokes train spotting. And of course, then that story continues to be quite a revelatory moment for Bugbee.
Yeah.
Big B.
Big B.
But yeah, I thought it was interesting that the second film sort of explains the title.
The second film explains heaps, doesn't it?
Yeah.
As I say, it explains their provenance and how they met and how everything kicked off. Interestingly, another trivia bit, you may have read this in interviews as well, but Danny Boyle said this at the premiere, that the way they came up with the title is, he thought, well, what on earth are we going to call this film? And he thought, well, what would Renton, Begbie, Spud and Sick Boy have called, what would they consider to be the best sequel movie? And it would probably be Terminator 2.
Yeah.
So that's why they decided they'd call it T2 Trainspotting, just to piss off James Cameron.
No, I think he said he wouldn't do it. I read that Danny Boyle wouldn't choose that title unless he got the blessing from James Cameron.
Oh, really? Oh, okay.
Yeah, but I didn't know that was
But it was
actually...
because he thought, what would the characters, what would they consider to be the best ever sequel?
Cool. Yeah.
You know, even maybe better than the first movie. Although we'd probably say Aliens, but what are you going to do? Trainspotting?
Well, I would say Aliens, but I do love the original T2.
But I love T2.
Well, I mean, just to connect to other films, I did not, when I first watched Trainspotting years ago, pick up the Clockwork Orange references. You know, with this, you know, Clockwork Orange about this young sort of antisocial youth with his friends, and also the way the story is written. The novel is written in this kind of dialect,
not voiceover, but I see what you mean.
The novel of Clockwork Orange, the novel of Trainspotting, there's
right.
a great connection there that they both are written in a very hard to understand dialect. But then you've got overt references to Clockwork Orange when they go into the club. And there's the Moloko milk bar.
Right.
I didn't pick
and then there's the scenes with the parents in the home.
Right.
And them trying to help their son. And it's the voiceover. It's very much a connection. And in fact, Danny Boyle specifically cast Ewan McGregor in thinking about Malcolm McDowell in Clockwork Orange.
I didn't know any of that.
Yeah.
And I now realise there are other things that I don't want to spoiler, but that may be used
from the first one?
No, in the second film, there are some props, if you will, that are used in a particularly important scene that one may recall from such films as Clockwork Orange. So yes, indeed.
And I mean, I just it hit me quite strongly that I thought, this is really very overt and really quite impressive, because I feel like to me it's on par with Clockwork Orange as being a great commentary on youth and life and human impulses within society. Yeah.
But it also, of course, signals to the observant viewer, such as yourself, Jeremy. I imagine that something in your brain then also feels that undercurrent of the sinister. Because there's always something in Trainspotting too. There is always this looming kind of thrillerness to it, not least because Begbie and Renton aren't immediately reconciled, and so, you know, there's always this sense that something's going to go wrong or full on or happen, or
it's a great tension, really good tension.
I think tension is exactly the word.
And there's not that in the first one. The first one, like I said, is a much more episodic film. Whereas this second one, it focuses on the four characters. They each get their space, but there is that overlying tension that, you know, Begbie's escaped from prison and he's
seeking revenge.
It is kind of like a thriller, isn't it?
It totally is. It's a whole revenge movie.
And the climax. That was one thing about it that felt very different for me, because it didn't feel like an action movie, obviously, but it comes to the end, and I was like, wow, we're getting a really big finale here, you know.
It reminded me of Blade Runner. It was like almost identical to Blade Runner with Deckard and Roy Batty, you know, being chasing him around, and I thought it's very similarly shot, beautifully shot. Both. I love Blade Runner, but the lighting and the visual effects and the dripping, leaking roof and things. Yeah. And then ultimately, it's about.
Don't give it away.
Yeah, but I'm not giving it away. But in terms of Blade Runner and the sort of questions of life and meaning, and
But you're right. But you're right. It is a big action finale, which is unusual. But it is in keeping with later Danny Boyle, because it's in keeping with Slumdog and Trance.
Yeah, and 28 Days Later.
And that's exactly right.
I think it's so interesting though, because so much of it's about time and memory and stuff like that. But then, and you're saying even the climax is about that, but at the same time, it doesn't, because it's turned into an action image. Which is purely based on the movement of the characters rather than the time.
Yes.
It does kind of undercut itself a little bit, I felt. Like, the start of the movie, most of the movie, does some really fantastic things with time, and it feels like we're not moving through time in just a A to B kind of fashion, which is what I love about its episodic nature of the first one. It's kind of the sense of time is just very different. But when you get to the action image, it's just like you're there, you're going through time very linearly.
It feels like a different sort of movie,
and so I
but
didn't really
still
like
Danny
that in
Boyle
some way.
movie.
But yeah, very Danny Boyle,
Yeah.
but just took me out of it a little bit in terms of where we've come from.
Yeah, I remember thinking at the time, this feels very disjointed and yet nonetheless wholly enjoyable.
Yeah.
And normally I'd be very critical of disjointed. If things lack coherence or cohesiveness, then I would usually, dock them stars for that sort of thing. I went into it with girded loins, as you did, Jeremy, because I thought, well, what sort of sequel is this going to be, and how on earth can you follow up something like Trainspotting, which was so particular in every aspect of itself. And luckily, I'd sort of had wind from the UK reviews that it was largely positive. So I went in thinking, all right, well, we'll see how this goes, and was pleasantly thrilled. So I feel it is as good as it could possibly be. I can't think of anything that I would have changed about it, although I have noted there were a few moments that felt a bit disjointed or a bit gratuitous or a bit whatever. But it feels like the second film is consistent with the sort of the tone of the first. I loved the maturity, in inverted commas, of its acknowledging we're 20 years on, this is what these young men have grown into. I love the updating of, obviously with the new Choose Life speech had to be updated, and I thought that was really beautifully done as well as beautifully delivered. So for me it was satisfying. I think some of the artistic choices for me were a little curious in terms of the constant flashbacks to them as children. And I do think that Danny Boyle has become a director who throws everything in, every aesthetic choice into his movies now, and maybe 90% of them stick and are right, and 10% I might go, well, if I'd been your editor, maybe I would have said, oh, do we really want to do that? But whatever, I'll give it, I feel like I'll give it to him, I'll forgive him, because the 90% is so terrific, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. I'm very much on your same page, I think, that 90% of it works fantastically. I'd give it 5 stars. It's a fantastic movie, and I think most of all, it's a massive accomplishment for Danny Boyle to be able to come back to this. That is just absolutely amazing that you could come back to a film with such a specific aesthetic and to create anything that even has any kind of standing next to Trainspotting, the original, 20 years later, is amazing. But I just think he does wear a bit of the challenges of becoming a bigger director with more power.
That's right,
I think
yes.
For me, that's the thing that happens, is when people get this kind of power, suddenly they can do what they want, and there's less constraints, and it becomes a little bit more flaky. There's a little bit too much going on maybe at different points.
Excellent. Well, thank you, listeners, for listening. We hope you enjoyed our discussion of Trainspotting and T2 Trainspotting. And make sure you check us out in a month's time for our next Cinema in Context podcast. Until next time, ka kite anō.